After a lifetime of researching the dynamic and enigmatic world of light entertainment, I've decided to ditch my notebook and meet the people who inspire me. What makes them the people they are? How do they feel about the show business landscape in which they find themselves? And in a world where anyone can be a star, is there still a need for performers who have universal appeal? Come with me on a journey of discovery as I get a unique insight into Britain's favourite stars with a little help from my glamorous assistants. Yeah, well, I say glamorous, more like hazardous. And of course, we'll have a bit of fun along the way.
Former Harrod security guard turned police officer Rav Wilding became a household name in 2004 when he made his debut on the BBC's Crime Watch whilst he was still serving in the Met. Having resigned from the police in 2008, Rav joined the presenting team on Crime Watch and soon fronted many other BBC crime-related programmes including Missing Persons Live, Crime Watch Roadshow and Helicopter Heroes. I caught up with the broadcaster to talk crime, protection and TV. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rav Wilding. One of the striking things about your early career is that you were a security guard at Harrods. What sort of responsibility was that on your relatively young shoulders?
That was a really good job, actually, but I'm glad you asked about the responsibility because it was a great responsibility. So Harrods is a massive store in central London that I had never been to before I started working there. It's very famous. It's got a lot of really expensive things in there, a lot of the rich and famous shop there, certainly well out of my reach. So the roles that we had were many, actually. We would sort of be the security front line on the doors, so we would make sure that things like the dress code that was in place was honoured, and we'd be turning people away with ripped jeans and who the boss didn't want in there because they were too scruffy. We would make sure that things weren't stolen. We'd be looking for activations on the what we call the checkpoint machines, the alarms on when people were, because there was a lot of theft there because of the value of the items. We'd be patrolling the store. But more than that, there was a lot of areas outside of the shop that the public could go to, where we would look after the security and safety of that. So we would be checking things like there was a bank, for example. A lot of people don't know that. There's a bank in Harrods. So we would be looking after that. We would be looking after all the deliveries coming in, make sure nothing's being nicked or stolen. So there was loads and loads of things that we would do, and it was a 24-hour job as well. So the store opening hours was just one small part of it. The real fun we had was probably in the small hours of the night when the store was closed, and we were just walking around the store with a torch, just making sure everything was safe and sound. So I really enjoyed that job. It was really good. It was all ex-military people like myself that worked there. It was very much like a military environment, and yeah, it was a really nice place to work.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Question 2. Did you always want to be a police officer?
I have always wanted to be a police officer since I was young, so probably around 12 or 13, really. So my grandfather and my grandmother on my mother's side were police officers themselves many, many years before I was born. And they actually died when I was probably around 15. So when I was about 12 or 13, I would see the pictures of them as police officers. My grandfather was a chief inspector and my grandmother was a sergeant. So, you know, they were good, they were experienced. They would absolutely try and, you know, tell me all the good stuff about the policing and tell me that, you know, stories about when they were in there. And it was that really that made me think of it as a possible job. And of course they died before I ever got to join the police, and I think that was probably part of what inspired me and drove me on to do it, because I know that they would have been so proud, and it kind of kept the family tradition, if you like, going. So from a young age, yes, about 12 or 13, and then I was only 22 when I joined, so pretty young.
Making your debut on the BBC's Crime Watch in 2004, how daunting was it being on camera for the very first time?
Josh, that was the most scary thing of my life, I can tell you. So Crime Watch is something that I grew up watching as a child. It had been on since 1984. And then in 2004, as you mentioned, was when I started. That was the 20th anniversary of the series. and I actually got the role. I auditioned with hundreds of other people, and then they whittled us down and down and down until I was eventually given the job. And it was because they specifically wanted someone from a sort of an ethnic minority background, because they didn't have anyone from a diverse background on the show. So I was really proud to be given that opportunity and to be the first sort of diverse presenter on the show. But it didn't prepare me for the nerves of live television in front of about 6 million people at the time. It's so nerve-wracking. My heart was actually beating so hard you could hear it on the microphone. That's how loud it was. But you know what? You get used to it. And I love live telly now. Love it more than anything else. And some people, it's just not for them. But it took some getting used to. But yes, very, very daunting. Where did we film it? Yeah. So back then we filmed it at the BBC White City, so the main television centre, which again was an amazing thing, because I walked into this place that I'd seen on telly, and there was all these other amazing shows that were going on, game shows, Jonathan Ross, Paul O'Grady, all these great big shows were filmed in the same building, and I'd see all these famous faces in the building as I was walking along. So it really was just such an amazing place for me to work. And what a lot of people don't know is when I started that in 2004, I was a police officer. So as soon as I finished the show, I would be back on duty as a police officer on my next shift, whether that was 8 o'clock the following morning or 10 o'clock that night. So sometimes I would go straight from Crime Watch to night duty CID and working in central London.
Okay, just 5 years previously saw the murder of former Crime Watch presenter Jill Dando. What sort of protection and support did you receive by the BBC and the police to prevent a similar situation from happening to you?
I mean, that's what happened was horrendous. It happened before I joined the show, but it's something that obviously everyone knew. It was a very high-profile case, and such an awful, awful thing to have happened. In answer to your question, not a great deal, if I'm honest. We didn't have, nothing extra was put in place that I was aware of. Unfortunately, I did have some problems of my own. I had a stalker of my own, which ended up going to court on 2 occasions. But thankfully the police were very good, and they did deal with that particular person, and they were convicted of the crime. So that's a good thing. I think we have for me anyway, I have a responsibility to look after my own protection, really. Doing these programs, there's a lot of people that are not pleased to see me on the telly, because I'm asking who this wanted person is. I'm saying, who is this person committing this crime in this piece of CCTV or whatever it is. So there's a lot of people out there, these criminals out there, who don't want me to identify them. So I do get some grief. I've had my car smashed up before whilst I was on TV, and although I could never prove it in a court of law, the police were pretty adamant it was someone that targeted me. So yes, some unpleasant things have happened, but I make sure my security is on a personal level up to scratch, and yeah, just look after myself, really. I think we all have to. But what happened to her is always going to be there, and it's just horrendous, and such a sad, tragic loss of life.
Okay. In 2008, you teamed up with Louise Minchin to take the reins on Missing Persons Live. How successful was this show in giving families of lost relatives the closure they needed?
That was a really, really good show that I worked on with Louise, and I really liked doing Missing, because it was a genuine appeal to the public to help, and we had so many people really genuinely getting in touch to try and offer the information that they could. And it was interesting, because sometimes with the Crime Watch programs, there's people that know full well what happened, but they don't want to get in touch because they don't want to be seen as a grass or whatever they want to call it. But with Missing People, it's slightly different. People genuinely all wanted to help and gave across the information that they could. So that was really heartwarming. The problems we had was sometimes people would even be found, but they didn't want to be found. They went missing there was only a few, but sometimes people went missing and it was deliberate and they didn't want to be found again. So when they were found, they didn't want to help and didn't want to go on the program and didn't want family members being told where they were. So that was a little bit difficult because sometimes we would do everything we thought we were doing right and people didn't actually want us to do it. So that was quite disappointing and deflating. But when we were genuinely able to find those that were in need and the family were happy to have some sort of closure, it really was quite rewarding indeed.
Okay, so beyond police investigations, you've also presided over another emergency service in Helicopter Heroes. What has this taught you about the vital work of the ambulance service?
Oh, they are just fantastic, the Helicopter Heroes. I spent probably about 6 years in total working alongside them, and they were just brilliant. 365 days of the year, they were there, ready to respond, and they had to do a big selection in order to get posted on the air ambulance, but they were ready to respond at the drop of a hat. No matter when it was, they would be running out the door onto that aircraft. And I had such a huge respect for them for doing that, because if you're on that helicopter, the chances are you are going to see the highest type of trauma possible, the worst kind of road accidents, or the worst of the worst, really, in terms of medical emergency. So they had to be really hardened professionals to deal with that day in and day out, and they absolutely were. In the 6 years that I worked with them, there wasn't a single person that wasn't the utmost professional example of what you would want. So it was brilliant to work with them and to see what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. I don't know many other people that could do that job.
Having spent the majority of your television career fronting factual-based programs, how important is it for the audience to see another side of your personality?
Oh, yeah, really important for me, that, Josh, because as much as I like what I do, it is typically very, very serious. And there is another side to me. I do like having fun, and I do like smiling, and I do like talking to people. I love talking to people and interacting with people. And a lot of the shows that I do, other than Crime Watch Roadshow, I don't get that opportunity. I'll be given a script, and I'll learn the script, and I will read that to the camera, where in Crime Watch Roadshow I get the opportunity to sit down and interview people and talk to them and hear their stories, and it's much more interactive, which I absolutely love. So I would love as much opportunity as possible to show another side of me, and a more human side, rather than, just perhaps a slightly one-dimensional side of me, which is just reading words to a camera, where it's slightly different, where I can be myself. So I really like doing that. Talking's good.
Do you think that's something you'll move into more into the future, go on to different types of shows?
Possibly, hopefully. I'd always be keen on other avenues. I'm talking to people at the moment about podcast ideas of my own, about radio, things where I can interact and talk. And although I'd always like to keep doing the crime shows, because I love them so much, and it's what I've done for 16 years now, absolutely would like the opportunity to do some more. So hopefully I get the opportunity to do a bit of both.
Excellent. Okay. You've recently been involved in ITV's A Full Monty to highlight male cancer. How important is this to you?
I thought that was really important to get that message across, because, I'm talking to two guys now. Guys typically are pretty rubbish at talking openly about sort of intimate problems, if you like. And that's really what the program was about. It was about the male cancers, prostate or testicular, which are the more intimate ones that people don't normally talk about if there's issues in that area. Men are rubbish about going to the doctor, for example. And I think doing something as, let's face it, as outrageous as stripping on TV was what it would take for people to go, why are they doing that? Oh, they're doing it to raise awareness for these male cancers. Oh, right, okay. And the feedback that I've got is absolutely extraordinary. More than anything else I think I've ever done on telly, where I've had complete strangers stopping me in the street saying, my husband's got himself checked because of that show. I've had taxi drivers saying, oh, I told my wife what show you were doing. They've told me to get checked, so I booked myself in with a doctor. You know, this has actually had a genuine impact on complete strangers. So it was such a privilege to be part of it, and I really genuinely think it's made a difference.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoy watching it as well. It's a good show. I watch it.
Yeah, it was good. Thank you. Did you watch the ladies as well? They were really good.
Yeah, I watch them both. Yeah, it's brilliant. Such a good show. Like, really heartwarming show, isn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, man.
You're laughing, you're crying, you know, you're going through...
Yeah, exactly. It was a bit of everything, wasn't it? It was a bit of everything.
Yeah. Okay. Looking back at your career, what's your proudest achievements?
That's a really difficult question to answer, what my proudest achievement was, because there's lots of different ones, you see. So being part of the All New Monty was one of them, because it was, by the end of it, when we did that routine, we were such a close bond of guys. We really knew what we were doing, and it was such a special environment that we will always treasure. So that was something I'm very, very proud of. But then I did a show called 71 Degrees North, which was a challenge show set in the Arctic, where we had to compete and do all these crazy challenges like swimming in the Arctic Sea and climbing frozen waterfalls. I won that show, so that was quite a proud achievement for me on a sort of personal level. But also doing something on Crime Watch. If we put out a piece of CCTV and a genuine stranger phones in and says, I know who that is, I know where that person is, and I hear the next day that the police have gone round and arrested them, that is something else I'm very, very proud of. So there's lots of different things that I'm proud of in different ways, and I don't really think I could highlight a single one. I've just been really lucky over the last 16 or so years to have many personal achievements.
Okay, and...
Oh, actually, Josh, sorry, there's one more silly one. If you've ever heard of the game show Tipping Point, I am the current record holder for Tipping Point, because I've got the most coins dropped in a single go, and that was 23. Yeah, not the greatest record to tell everyone, you know, but you know, it's not like Usain Bolt's 100-meter record, but it's a good one for me.
I do vaguely remember you doing that. Actually, now you say that.
Yeah, it's good fun. So someone will beat it one day.
How long ago was that?
Oh, it's a few years ago now, probably about 6 years ago, I would say. Possibly, yeah, about 6 years ago. It was myself, Michelle Marsh, and Dennis Taylor, the snooker player. We did it.
That is a random one. Okay. What's next for Rav Wilding?
Sorry, I said Michelle Marsh, Kim Marsh, sorry. What's next for me? So at the moment I'm working on a TV show which is called Ill-Gotten Gains, which is on BBC. That's all about what's called the Proceeds of Crime Act. So when a criminal's been arrested and convicted at court, then if they have been making criminal money from, say, for example, selling drugs, then the police now have the power to go to their home and take all the things they've bought with that criminal money. They take it away, put it at an auction, people buy it, and all the money that's raised at auction, it goes back into the public purse. So it's a real win-win situation. So we're auctioning off things like designer watches, designer clothes, cars, motorbikes, boats, all these things that have been bought by criminals with their criminal money, and then the money's being sent back into the public purse to either help victims or build things like a community garden or a youth club or something like that. So it's a real win-win. So I'm working on that at the moment.
When is it out? When is it out?
It's coming out soon. They haven't got an official date, but it's going to be in the summer, and it's 15 shows on BBC One, Ill-Gotten Gains. It'll be on in both the morning, and then they're going to put it on in the evening as well.
Okay, brilliant.
A big thank you to our guest for being the subject of another Beyond the Title interview. If you like this, why not browse the website and see if there's anything else that takes your fancy. Don't forget to like our Facebook page to receive updates of forthcoming interviews and to see more information about me and what I do. Thanks again, and hopefully see you next time for another Beyond the Title interview.